so again, thank you everybody. This is week 5, day 2, week 5 of ADHD Awareness Month. And we are talking to Kerry, and we are going to be talking all about resume writing in an ADHD-friendly way. And so I'm thankful for her presence. I'm thankful for her doing this work, to be honest, because feels very unheard of. And so this is a very unique niche, and it's a very it's a niche that is critical to our existence, especially when it comes to work and to finding jobs and all the things. So we're going to get into the nitty-gritty today. And so please, if you are listening, share and let other people know that we're live right now as well. But Kerry, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry. I am a resume writer and an ADHD career coach, and I help people figure out how to get from where they are to their next job. So everything from figuring out what that next step is, and then writing our application to get that job, doing the interview, and all the way through the offer letter.
That's awesome, and that's such a that's such a unique and critical service, because the amount of times that we're changing jobs and the amount of times that like our ADHD is like impulsively quit, and so like trying to find that next new thing is really critical, and we just need that targeted support. So what is your approach to the work?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. We are definitely, as ADHDers, we're much more likely to quit impulsively, much more likely to have, we just have a lot more adversity in general
Yeah.
with our careers. So my approach to the work is really coming from a place of noticing that it's going to be an emotional process, most likely. Most of the clients that come to me are a little bit in a state of, I know I need a new job. Either they just got laid off or they just got fired, which are both very, they can be in themselves traumatic.
Yeah.
Which I relate to too. Having been fired before, it was very much a traumatic experience for me. Yeah.
Yeah, the trauma that comes along within the workplace is real, and it has to be dealt with, and not just the trauma of just dealing with toxic work environments, but then also just dealing with work environments that are not supportive of the ADHD brain, and like working with managers and leaders that don't understand ADHD. And I posted on my LinkedIn page, I pinned an article about management and the importance of recognizing that managers have more impact on the employees' mental health than their own therapist and their own spouse. And so it's such a crucial role, but it's not one that really takes in a lot of training or consideration, just working with neurodiverse employees. And so, yeah, people quit, and rightfully so in a lot of cases.
Yeah, exactly. And that, I think, is to our benefit, because we tend to be those justice warriors too, right? So, I know my own experience. Like, if I see BS, I was going to call it out. If I saw people being mistreated, I was going to call it out. I wasn't just going to sit there and let it happen. And a lot of people are like that too. So it's not uncommon to have those relationships where, you're just butting heads with your boss all the time. And so that's where it starts. As far as the process and getting started, first we recognize that this is going to be an emotional journey, and that and I'm there, as support. I think ADHDers, when you're going on a job search, you're going to need as much emotional support as possible.
You really do. You really do, because you're going to have to process that drama, like that trauma. And also, not that also, but I also even like through the series, there's been a lot of conversations with all of my guests around trying to decide or trying to figure out what type of job they want to do, and just that search process. And this happens in adulthood in general, right? Like neurodiverse or not neurodiverse, like everybody's trying to figure out what they want to do in life, right? Because that's and then with ADHD, it's like we like this part, but we don't necessarily like this part, and trying to find a job that's really going to be good for us as an individual. And you're right about the social justice thing too. It's like if we're in an environment that is mistreating others, like that's most likely not going to be a good fit for us. So dealing with that emotional roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also depending on, what age you are too. And when you're looking for a job, it's like, oh man, I should have been here by now in my career, or I should have been there by now in my career,
Yes.
or I'm starting over. And so dealing with a lot of those conversations is really an important first step. I love that.
Yeah. Yep. Knowing we're going to be having to take a look at those, because and I think that's one of the hardest things about sitting down to write your resume. I mean, I think we've all been there. If anyone's ever written a resume before, you probably procrastinated at least a little bit.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I can picture an ADHD is like, time to write my resume, and then sits down and just breezes through it. You're gonna have to look at all of those experiences. You're confronted with a whole work history of,
Mhm.
I mean, of course, we've had a lot of amazing things that we've done.
Mhm.
Um, but then even some of our best stories and our like biggest achievements
Mhm.
are have a little bit of negativity sprinkled in too. So it's there, and we have to be able to look at it. We have to be able to just breathe through it and do our best to realize that we did a lot of positive things too, because we tend to see the negative. We see all the negative before we see the positive. That's typically
Yeah.
what
I'm
we do.
so glad you said that too, because it's true. I never really thought about it in that way until right this second, is that when you're reviewing your own resume, it's bringing up a lot of stories, and
Yeah.
some good and some bad. And because we have a negative bias, it's just like we're going to be thinking about the negative stories. And so that in itself can delay us from moving forward in the resume writing process, because we're
Mm-hmm.
stuck in those stories and that loop. And getting through that is really important in order to be able to get through your resume.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's so crucial. Yeah, because when I look at my resume, I'm like, oh, I remember so and so that used to work there.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, which can
Yep.
also be trouble on LinkedIn too. Like if we go and we use LinkedIn, a lot
Mhm.
of the people that we're connected to, or like they're or people that, even if we're not connected to the people that were like unsafe people, like they're
Mhm.
connected to those unsafe people. So it can be very triggering even to get on LinkedIn and effectively use that as a tool.
Yeah, and that also reminded me of like when you're filling out applications too, and they're like, "Oh, can we talk to your previous supervisor?" And you're like, "I mean,
Mm-hmm.
do I
No.
want you to?" And you're like, "No, no, you cannot." And I'm hoping that they honestly don't work there and that they probably got fired too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
um,
Yeah.
so after we get through the emotional roller coaster process and we finally get to writing, where do we go next?
Yeah, good question. Actually, before we start writing, the way I like to approach it, um, is to really gain awareness of the market, because a
Mhm.
lot of ADHDers just don't understand what's involved. And actually, this is something that I learned. My husband is a recruiter, and for every job opening he had, I wound up asking him one day, like, how many applications are you going through?
Mhm.
And he does executive level work, so he was in the thousands for every job application that was opening that he was hiring for. He was getting at least 1,000 for that job. Now, typically, like earlier or mid range, you'll get somewhere between 100 and a recruiter will get somewhere between 100 and 250
Uh-huh.
applications. For those really niche careers, they'll get about 50. Um, but the takeaway here is we have to recognize that if this is just a symptom of online job searching, if it's easy for you to apply to a job, if it takes you, you know, half an hour or less
Mhm.
to apply to that job, just think about all the other people who are like it's easy for them to apply to. So the takeaway from that is we need to get targeted. We have to make
Mhm.
sure that our resume is written to the job description, because when that recruiter goes and opens up their inbox full of hundreds of applications, they spend an average about 6 to 7 seconds per resume making deciding who's going to make the short list. And so we need to be really clear and concise. This is another ADHD trouble spot.
Uh,
We have a tough time taking our whole career history and getting it down to 1 to 2, maybe 3 pages if you're an executive. But we have a very short space to make our case. And so um, starting with what I start with a master resume, which is we're looking for, looking at our target job, finding our the kind of common denominator skills,
mhm.
and then writing that master resume to that job, which then we'll later kind of tweak, spend about 10 minutes tweaking per uh, each company, each individual listing that we're going to apply to.
So you said so many things that I think the people that are listening to this, and whether or not you're listening to this live or listening to the replay, that is so important. These recruiters are really only taking 6 to 7 seconds to look at your resume.
Mm-hmm.
In the back of my mind, this is probably a different conversation for another day, but like, when is this process going to change? Because this doesn't feel
Yeah.
like a fair or effective process.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel equitable. It doesn't feel fair. It just feels like the recruitment process in general, there needs to be a major shift. But
Yes.
that's a whole other,
Yes.
I feel like that's like a whole other conversation, because
Oh, I could
this,
have a whole other conversation on how how overloaded recruiters are, and they have one of the highest turnover rates because it's such a high pressure job,
yeah,
which is something.
and they don't like the whole process. I just feel like is just not fair. Like, I'm having a really hard time with this process anyway, and so
Yeah.
I'm trying to move on. The
I hear
because
ya.
it's just not inclusive. Like, it's not an inclusive practice, and um, a lot of people are not getting positions or not getting an opportunity for very minimalistic issues that really have nothing to do with what the job is that they're going to be doing. And I just feel like that's not fair. But anyway, that's here
Yeah.
nor there. um, so we're writing this resume, we have this master resume, and we're targeting the job that it is that we're applying for. And then
Mm-hmm.
from there, we're making some tweaks depending on the job. So all of this, so I'm thinking about all of the challenges that someone in ADHD is going to have. One, like you said, being clear and concise. That's automatically going to be a challenge. And then there's also the emotional dysregulation is the other challenge that we had talked about. But then I'm also thinking about time management
Mm-hmm.
as it relates to doing this, and thinking about, like, you don't, when you apply to jobs, like, you're not applying to just one job. And even with that master resume, like, it may go with multiple jobs, but it may not. And so, like, the idea of tweaking it that many times, like, people are applying to 20, 30, 40, like, people are applying to a lot of jobs, right? And so thinking about, like, how much time do you actually have, and also just the emotional, like, regulation, dysregulation that comes along with that too, right? It's like, man, I'm feeling this pressure because I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and my family. I'm trying to get my foot into the door. I'm filling out this document that somebody is really only taking 6 to 7 seconds to look at. And now I'm spending hours writing
Mm-hmm.
and rewriting resumes that people aren't even looking at.
Yeah. So that's, I think, the part two, what you mentioned, like sending out so many resumes. That's kind of the second biggest mistake that I see job seekers making. And I think that's kind of the wisdom that's out there, is that, it's a numbers game. Like, um, the idea that I see is that if you send out, the more applications you send out, the more likely someone's going to offer you an interview.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, I think, like you mentioned, we have to be mindful of our energy and the time that we're spending.
Mm-hmm.
So I always say, like, quality is always going to be better than quantity. So instead of spending, like, sending out 20 applications per week, maybe you're only sending out a handful.
Mm-hmm.
But taking that time that you'd be spending looking up open jobs and just, what we call the career industry, it's called the spray and pray method. Just spraying your resume and praying someone's gonna take a bite.
Yeah.
Uh, that is just, it's actually just draining your energy
Mm-hmm.
really quickly. Um, so if we're kind of spending more time tweaking it, and we're spending, it shouldn't take more than really 10 or 15 minutes. It's just kind of swapping out keywords, or kind of mirroring the language that we find in the job description for the resume itself. But I think the biggest workaround for that, getting stuck in the ATS, what we call the ATS black hole. The ATS, by the way, is applicant tracking systems. That's what recruiters use to just amass all of those hundreds of applications that are sent to them, and how to work with them. The way we get around that is really to find either the recruiter's contact information, or doing a little internet sleuthing, trying to find the hiring manager, and sending them an email. And in that email, saying exactly why you're interested in that job, and have it really come from the heart. Like, I'm interested in this job because I see that your company values are X, Y, and Z, and that aligns with mine. Or, especially if you're in like a social impact space, what about the job are you passionate about? Why do you want to work for that company? What kind of results have you, achieved for other companies? How can you apply that to this company and a particular problem that they're having right now? Those things, highest chances of getting your resume seen. You get automatic kind of interest from the hiring manager. Hiring managers are always going to want to hire someone who wants to work for them.
Yeah. And again, this is, and maybe this is just my bias and annoyance with the hiring process, like all of that. So like what I'm hearing you say is the networking piece, and also really getting to know the company that it is that you're applying for, and then communicating your interest, and making yourself known to them, and so that you're not just another number in the list of the resumes that are in this system.
Exactly.
Which is, again, like why I feel like this whole process is so inequitable.
Yeah, it's a lot to
And
pay
also,
attention to.
and not inclusive too, because like if you are not a natural like outgoing person, and you're a little bit more reserved, or like social skills, or some of those other challenges that may come up for you, is not you have to be taught those, and that's could be it could be a weaker executive function, and so now you're already at the bottom of the list just by being neurodiverse.
Right. Yeah, you're definitely required to step outside your comfort zone in order to get some traction, which is, yeah, it's inherently difficult as an ADHDer. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the job search and all that's required, it's almost all of what's required are executive functioning challenges. Like, we haven't even gotten to the part about how you manage all these different job searches, and the people you talk to, and remembering what you talked to the other person that you interviewed with last week, and then keeping track of who you're talking to this week. And
right, and they want to make sure that you're paying attention to all of that, which really isn't fair either. But that's, again,
yeah,
I clearly have a lot of opinions about this.
It is. You're totally right. It's an uphill battle to be in the position of interviewing, and all we can do is, again, by getting back to like regulating that emotions, like that, just how, like, you're, as you're hearing this and like what's involved, like it's going to stress us out.
It is going to stress us out, and it's also going to stop us from initiating, and stop us from finishing. So it's like, that procrastination has, so there's front end and back end procrastination, and so what's stopping you from starting, what's stopping you from finishing, and thinking about all of the thoughts that come into our heads around this whole process, and still also feeling the pressure of knowing that you need to survive. Can be really difficult. And if you're getting some external communication too, from partners, from family members, it's like, how come you don't have a job yet? And then it's making you a little bit more anxious, and now you're trying to navigate through all of this nonsense that's happening within your head and trying to get focused enough to be able to finish this document so that you can get a job.
Yeah.
That is really overwhelming just to
Yeah.
even just to talk about, right? Um,
Yeah.
can
Exactly.
I ask you a quick question about this? I have a couple questions about the ATS system
Hmm.
and when it comes to resume writing and how do you create a resume that will pick up the keywords or pick up whatever it is that the person's looking for in the system?
Yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, every recruiter has their own system for how they source resumes.
Okay.
Um, the most, the keyword swapping, I think that's important for those jobs in which you have to have some real hard skills. Like, if this job you're requiring you have to um, know Python. Like,
Mhm.
make sure your resume includes Python and maybe a few times, because a recruiter might do like a Boolean search looking for that specific skill. Um, but I definitely warn against keyword stuffing because a lot of people get tripped up when they hear the word ATS and they figure out that there's kind of like a potentially like a resume ranking system within the
Mhm.
ATS. Sometimes they can bump people up to the top of the list if certain keywords are picked up. Um, the likelihood that that will happen is, it might, but don't keyword stuff either. You got to write for a human. So I say,
Yeah.
like, don't worry too much about it. If there are certain requirements that you find in that job description, make sure you mention those.
Mhm.
Um, but a lot of like internet wisdom out there is like, mention it several times, make sure you mention it 5 times, make sure you mention the 7 times, and that's going to drive you crazy. And I don't think it's necessary most of the time. So write natural language, make sure you're including those skills, but at the end of the day, you got to write for the human that's going to read it too, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Somebody asked us a question. I want to create a resume for executive level roles. How can I make my resume stand out?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think the way that I start the resume writing process is just looking at the job openings that are out there, and you're
Mhm.
going to pick like 5 to 7 job descriptions that represent the full range of jobs that you want
Mhm.
to get. Stay within one job title or 1 to 2 job titles. So, say it's a a director of finance or a VP of finance or something like that. Um, if you're also considering like VP of HR roles, that would be two separate resumes, if that makes sense. So we're kind of finding job descriptions for one title,
Okay.
and then what we're going to do is we're going to compile, take out all of those skills and requirements, um, and put them together on one sheet. So we've got 5 different job descriptions, all of the critical skills and requirements. And then I run it through ChatGPT and I ask, what are the common denominator skills? So that kind of gives us something to work with. Now we can write a resume to that. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to write a master resume to the common denominator skills and requirements. And then the next step after we have that master resume, or at least we've kind of written out um, our experience. And remember, professional experience section, it's not everything we've ever done. It's everything we've done relevant to that career. So, we're, emphasizing the achievements that we've that demonstrates our skills the most, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I'm thank you for saying the relevant part because
mhm,
with ADHDers we feel like everything. I mean,
yeah.
yes, everything you do is important in life, absolutely, and we will
Yeah.
honor and respect that. However, when you're looking for a particular role and then you have had dissected the skills that are necessary in order to complete that role and the skills that they're looking for, making sure that you're carving out your experiences that are related to that and putting that on your resume. But
Yes.
with that, when you do that, there may be gaps in time. So how do you justify that?
You mean gaps in skills and experience, or gaps
or
on the
like
resume between
gaps on the
jobs?
resume, yeah, in between. Well, because like maybe the in between job has nothing to do with the job that you're applying for, so now it
Yeah.
looks like you were unemployed for like 3 years or something like that. And so what, how do you just explain that in like a cover letter?
Yeah, you can do that. You can explain on the cover letter. Oh, I would include it. Include all of your experience, but and sometimes they'll just put like a short like scope of responsibility paragraph,
Okay.
or keep that kind of thin if it's not relevant. If we can still find transferable skills, then I would build out that.
Yep.
It depends on the job and the situation.
Yeah.
But include it. I wouldn't leave a gap unless you had to. And then that comes up a lot with ADHDers too. Like there are times where we take mental health years. And there's just a space of year or two, or more on a resume. Or
Mm-hmm.
I stayed at home with my kids. I put that on my resume that I was a stay-at-home mom. So I think we
Mm-hmm.
tend to worry about that. Like I think we really worry, or at least in my experience, um, a lot of us kind of see that gap on a resume and see it as a much bigger flaw than
Yeah.
it
And
usually is not as big a deal as
and
we
thank
think
you
it
for
is.
putting stay-at-home mom on your resume, because if you can survive with the children at the house, you can do literally anything at work.
Right? And I have an employer that would understand that.
Exactly, like exactly. And I think that's important. Like, you want to work for a company that truly understands and values you as a whole person. Um, and if you have never been like being at home with your child all day, every day, and doing all of the things that are required and all the things that are also taxing your executive functions, and you
Yeah.
survived and your kids survived.
That is an achievement
Yes, that is
for
a
sure.
huge achievement. I mean, honestly, you probably have done more as a stay-at-home mom than you would in some of these positions that they have available.
Oh yeah. I
um,
mean it's more than a full-time job. You're never off. There's no PTO.
yeah, which is like, which is a whole other conversation. But like doing all of
Mhm.
that and having ADHD,
Yeah.
you can do anything. So if you're doubting your skills, please don't.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
um, The other question that I had last week, somebody had asked, and I told them to wait. I was like, you need to wait until next week. Was around career changes, or
Mm.
like kind of starting over, or like having jobs that don't necessarily really lead to any particular direction. And how do you explain that in writing on a resume?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love this question. These are the resumes that I love to write. It's kind of like a puzzle where I love to take that information. I think oftentimes we have a lot more transferable skills than we
Mm-hmm.
realize. Like it's such an ADHD thing to have that curvy career where like
Mm-hmm.
it's not that straight path, and it's actually becoming more of the norm anyway. So it's not even like really specific to ADHDers anymore. That being said, first of all, knowing where you're going. I think the most important part again is deciding on what your next job target's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how we make a cohesive career story geared toward that. Um, and then one of my favorite like storytelling models. I haven't even talked about the storytelling yet, but ideally we're creating a story or crafting a story about where we've been in our career, where we are now, and
Mm-hmm.
where we're going. And that really helps to kind of like recruiters resonate with that. Hiring managers resonate with that. Um, they'll understand who you are if you can give them that story. So it's a matter of um, weaving them together. So I use the FITS model. This is from Stephen Dalton. His book, I think it was 2 Hour Job Search. Anyway, he has this model where you tell your for each position that you've had, your favorite part of that job,
Mm-hmm.
the insight you gained from that. So what did you learn? And then transition. You talk about why you transitioned to that next job. And I love this model because it really, no matter how curvy or
Yeah.
wavy or disjointed your career story is, you have a way to weave it together. Um, So your favorite, then what did you learn from that, and then why did you make that transition? And yeah, there's always ways of kind of building that toward your future or
I love
target.
that. So when I was recruiting, when I was a recruiter and a hiring manager at some point in my career, um, I never, so I did do sometimes a quick search, depending on how many resumes I had, like I could take more time, but I was definitely looking for and mostly because I was looking for positions that required like certain certifications or certain licenses. And so that made it a little bit easier because
Yeah,
it's like, if you aren't licensed, like I can't hire you, and that it is what it is. Um, and so that made it a lot easier.
yeah,
So if positions that do require certifications, like make sure that you have that information on there for sure. But then I
yes,
also and so I always like I feel like it's a mixed bag in the HR hiring manager slash recruiter world around cover letters. I never read a cover letter.
mm.
Never.
Now this was when you were in HR. Yeah, that is typical of HR. If you're not the direct hiring manager, they typically don't
I
read
was
the
the
cover
direct
letters.
hiring manager and I never read a cover letter.
Oh,
But
okay. Yeah.
but but my director, like if I like, if there was a hiring team, there was other people on the team that did read the cover letter. And
Hmm.
so it was always a mixed bag. And I'm like, I'm not reading this. Like there's a particular formula people use. And like, if
Yeah.
it's not like, and I feel like I read an article about how like some company was receiving a bunch of cover letters that were the same because everybody was using
Yeah.
ChatGPT and it was like the same cover letter.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I'm like, I feel personally, and I think I wrote a post about this actually on LinkedIn, is that from my perspective, if you like, what are you testing? Like your hiring process should be testing whatever it is that the person is doing at the job. And so if you're requiring a cover letter that you're
Hmm.
testing a skill set that isn't required for that person's position, then it's unnecessary. It's an unnecessary task.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
really, I would argue that it would be against ADA. And so, like, you need to be testing for the skills that are required for the position. And so, if
Yeah.
you're evaluating somebody against, like, in the skills that are required in order to write a cover letter, if those aren't the skills that are required to do the job, then you don't need to ask somebody to do a cover letter just to be doing a cover letter.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
also, if you're asking people to do a cover letter, but then you're also asking specific questions after they write the cover letter that the cover letter is supposed to answer, you're also wasting
Oh,
people's time. Like, stop doing that.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there's a culture around cover letters that I think is shifting in some areas,
Yeah.
and in some industries, because it really is a waste of people's time in a lot of cases. One, either it's just testing a skill that isn't necessary for the job, or people aren't reading it,
Yeah.
and people don't necessarily take that process that seriously either.
Yeah. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, what's the point? I mean, I would argue like, what's the point of this? Like, really?
Yeah.
And it feels like an old school versus new school like process and thought process.
Yeah.
And I was
Hmm.
wondering what your thoughts were.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. The cover letter. I mean, I've seen it required less and less over the years. They're definitely
Hmm.
like trending down and falling out of favor because we're finding out that yeah, I think the statistics are, less than very few recruiters ever read them, and then hiring managers around maybe a little bit more than 50% will read them. So really not. If you look at those numbers, what's the return on investment here
Hmm.
to spend that much time on a cover letter? However, I think they're kind of, if you think about what a cover letter should do, I think most people think that a cover letter kind of summarizes their resume, but your resume is already a summary of your career.
Hmm.
So it's like, uh, I don't, I don't think that's the best way to go about it. What a cover letter should do optimally is express your interest and your excitement. So I see it as an opportunity. I see it as an opportunity to express from, what makes you interested in that job. Um, and then I think is something that, I think it helps to put you or help you stand out.
Mm-hmm.
if you have that opportunity to do that. And the other thing is cover letters don't, I think nowadays that is actually best done in an email. Like, if you're going to directly send your resume to a hiring manager, ideally you're
Mm-hmm.
finding their contact information, or even on LinkedIn, if you're going to reach out on LinkedIn. Just a quick blurb. Hey, I'm applying to this job. I'm really excited for this opportunity because I see this company values honesty and integrity, and I'm all about honesty and integrity. Those are my highest values. Something like that. Some kind of like
Yeah.
quick introduction that shows that you did your homework, that you're not spraying and praying. Because if you think about the recruiter and the hiring manager, and they're kind of getting all these like resumes, from hundreds of people, there's that doubt in their mind. Like, are they really interested in this role, or are they
Mm-hmm.
just trying to get a job? So they're just sending their application everywhere.
But I mean, people are just trying to get a job in a lot of cases. And so sometimes there is this assumption that companies make that people like they just assume that people just want to work for them. And it's like not,
Mm.
I mean, in some cases, like you could be here today and here tomorrow, like to be honest. And so like working for you in particular or may not be that of interest and also with the company too. It's like you're a cool company, sure, but am I devoting my life to you? No. And so I think sometimes I feel like companies take that idea of like you need to truly be want to work for them for it's like over like I feel like they overcompensate or not overcompensate is not the right word. It's um I don't know what the word is, but they
Yeah,
just make
they're
too many they make
require a lot of to make your case.
yeah, and it's like the assumption is that you just want to work for them. And sometimes like, a lot of the times I hear people say like, listen, like I don't know what to say. Like, yes, they're a cool company, sure, that they have some qualities and they have some values that I believe in. Sure, but at the end of the day, I just want to go to work. I want to be able to devote some time and energy to this particular task, and then I want to go home and I want to live my real life. And
Yeah.
especially, and so how do you, and especially for ADHDers, and a lot of us are entrepreneurs, and so it's like I actually just need this position just to cover some of my income, like to supplement some of my income, so that I can do what I'm actually really passionate about, which is not you,
Mhm.
like the employer. And so, like,
Yeah.
how do you deliver that message on paper without coming across as like I don't know, snobby or just
Yeah. Like I'm
just
just in it for the money.
yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't write that. I wouldn't say like, "Hey, I'm applying to this job because I need the money," and you listed your salary range as this, and I need that. In that case, I just wouldn't send the cover letter.
And sometimes we're honest. Like you ask me, and because people always ask, like, why are you interested in this position? It's like because I have the skill set to do the position, but I'm using like because I can. It's easy for me to do this because it's something that I've already done, and then
Yeah.
I can go home and do what I really want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in that case, I would frame it as I'm looking to leverage my experience and then, name whatever you worked in before. I'm confident that I can achieve similar results for your company. Something like that. And I think like if
That
you're having trouble with
was good.
actual wording, ChatGPT can help you with that too. Don't
Also,
have
that was good.
ChatGPT write the whole thing because you also have to keep in mind ChatGPT crawls the internet and finds the most uh, you know, puts it all together. So like, it's going it's going to give you return a result based on what everyone else says. But if
Yep.
you give it a little more direction and you say, here's what I want to convey. I want to convey that I've done this before and I have the experience to do it. It can help you with the kind of wordsmithing of
I
that.
I love that. Yeah, ChatGPT I feel like has, or just AI in general, has kind of changed the game when it comes to being able to fully articulate your thoughts. That can sometimes be difficult to articulate, or be
Yeah.
able to articulate in a way that the receiver wants to hear it, but not necessarily how you want to express it. Um,
Mm,
because
yeah.
you may want to say, like, I just want to get paid. Like, I just
Yeah.
need to pay my bills, and this is something that I can do. And then, ChatGPT will help you turn it around and to use
Yeah.
language that can sell you a little
Yes.
bit better. Um,
Yes.
and is is nicer on the ears of the person that's receiving it. Um,
Yes.
but interesting enough, like me being an ADHDer and doing the hiring and recruiting, like I'm like, just give me the like, be honest. Like I would prefer
Yeah.
for the person to just be honest than
Mm-hmm.
to give me fluff just because you think that it is what I want to hear. But
Exactly.
but I feel like that almost is the difference between an ADHD doing recruiting and hiring versus a non-ADHD doing recruiting and hiring. Just like being on the other end.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that anyone would probably want to hear the truth. And then, everyone's got their different levels of BS meters, right? So if you hear something that's like, I want this job because I'm perfect for it because I've got all this out, but they're probably like, oh. Like
Yeah.
keep it in the realm of reality. But I would argue, I mean, we ADHDers, I mean, there's different levels. So if we're going for our dream job, we really want to make that case as,
Mhm.
that cover letter, any way that we can make our case that this is something we're really, really, really interested in is always going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Um, for that bridge job, that job, like I'm here, I need to get here with my career. This is where I'm going, but I need something in between. Um, if you're not if you don't like that job at all, if there's nothing you can come up with to put on, to sell yourself, like you were saying,
Yeah.
um, that might be a bit of a red flag. Sometimes
Mhm.
that comes up where it's just like, well, what are you interested in and why do you want this job? And if you can't come up with anything other than I need the money, I would caution, like, is this job going to be sustainable for you?
Yeah.
And for how long? Because we need to have something interesting in order to sustain that job. Some of us can only last a couple months in a job where we're just doing like pure executive functioning tasks. That's going
Mhm.
to burn us out so quickly. And I would say, if you do have a side hustle, something you're working toward, you need to have the energy at the end of the day to
Yep.
pick that up.
That is
So
such a good point. We are ADHD brain is very interest focused, and so if there isn't something that is truly attracting you to the particular role, you are going to lose interest in it immediately, and that's going to make it harder for you to complete tasks.
yeah,
100 and like 10%.
yeah,
And so really trying to take the time to identify your why is going to be truly important for you as an ADHDer. And that's going to be translated in your resume, in your cover letter, in your interview process. That is such an important point.
yeah. Yeah,
Love
we
that.
definitely. I think that's the bottom line too of the whole, ADHD job search is we're protecting our energy as much as we can. So
Mm-hmm.
those times where we're spending more time, with each application and we're looking at those jobs and making that case of why we want to work there.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, we're saving ourselves energy because we're
Mm-hmm.
going to, at the name of the game, you just want to make a connection. You want to position yourself as the right match for the role because that's what the hiring manager is looking for. Who's the
Mm-hmm.
best match? Who's the best? Um, and I don't want to say best. Like it's just kind of it's. I think that might be a trigger word sometimes for ADHDers. We're not trying to be superhuman. We're just trying to be um, lean into our strengths as ADHDers because we
Yeah.
really do have the capacity to be really amazing workers.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
We've got all of it. Like we can, if we love what we're doing, we can be a
And do anything.
superstar, rock star. We can knock it out of the park. So just
Yeah.
making sure that we're communicating that is what we're the ultimate goal.
One thing that we haven't talked about when in terms of the actual development of the resume, just thinking about like the attention to detail that is
Mm,
required when writing the resume too, and sometimes like the proofreading can be a little bit difficult depending on if you're doing it on the computer or you actually print it out, and paying attention to those little details and making sure that we're consistent in our writing style, and our approach to the resume. I think that is an important thing to like kind of take some time to make sure to double check because we can read stuff and then not really read stuff.
yeah. Yep.
Potentially take a break or just have somebody else proofread it.
Yep.
I think is important too,
Mm-hmm.
because that stuff can be a turnoff for
Yeah.
those that are looking at the resume.
Yep. And again, I'm going to keep bringing up ChatGPT, but sometimes that could be your best friend too. To look, drop it in and say, edit this for voice consistency, punctuation. It can really turn that stuff
Mm-hmm.
up and flag it.
Thinking about the different parts of a resume, what is no longer needed? And then what do you need to
Ooh.
make sure that you include?
Oh, that is so good. Um, I think a lot of like, oh, I'm off the top of my head, like executives or people who are well into their career tend to put their education at the top. That's outdated. Putting that at the bottom. Now you've had so much more experience typically than that's that's more impactful than listing your education. Um, adding like references upon request that we don't need to do. I think the name of the game is every word or every phrase that we put on that resume needs to earn its place on that resume.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're just ordering that in terms of importance. So what is totally out of favor now, I think, is the objective statement. If you're applying to that job, they know that you're trying to get that job.
Yeah.
You don't need to write, my objective is to get this job. Um, that's
Yeah.
very much implied. So instead of using space on that, we're gonna, what has replaced that is a summary section where you're um, taking your most relevant experience and kind of bumping that to the top. Again, 6 to 7 seconds to read a resume. If you get a recruiter that's only doing that, you, and especially if you're a career changer where some of your best or most relevant experience is on page 2, we're going to
Mm-hmm.
want to bump that up in the summary section. And it's really a couple of phrases. I've seen people get carried away and it's taking off more than a half page. That's typically not how much we need to include. It's just really summarizing those top 3, maybe top 5 most marketable skills and making your case. That's what we call prime real estate on the resume, and making sure you're positioning yourself as a match right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. That is so true. And you said 2 pages. How long should a resume be?
Yeah, I think most professionals have about 2-page resume. 5 to 7 years is the cutoff from 1 pages to 2 pages. And it kind of depends on how much relevant experience you have.
Mm-hmm.
If you have enough relevant experience at 5 years and you're going for maybe a little more senior role, you've earned yourself a second page. Then again, I've also had career changers who don't have enough experience after 7 years. They're going for something completely different. You still might, and you might end up with a 1 page resume that
Mm-hmm.
way. Um, so there's no hard and fast rules in resume writing. It's kind of like, it's all about relevance and making sure that's super tailored. 15 years, 20 years experience, we get a third page. Typically director level or above will be a 3-page resume.
And then the other random question that I had, sorry that I feel like I'm just throwing all these random questions at you today,
No, I'm
um,
here for it.
was just about, some people have been in leadership positions for a really long time, and then they're like, listen, like, I'm just not interested in the stress of being in a leadership position anymore. And, you look at their resume and they should be the VP or they should be the executive director, like, at this point in their career, but they're like, like that extra level of pressure and that role is just not what I'm interested in anymore. And so I
Mhm.
may look for like a coordinator or some other like individual contributor position instead of being in a leadership position. So is that just something you just explained in the cover letter because
Yeah.
um, they're like looking at your resume, they're like, why are you applying to this coordinator position and you've been in a senior leadership position for the past 10 years?
Yeah. Yeah, that's another great place. The best opportunity to explain that is in a cover letter. Again, ideally you're reaching out, you're figuring out who's hiring for that, and you
Mm-hmm.
can explain, this is why I'm going for this level. This is one of the things where I think people get really kind of anxious about, like having
Mm-hmm.
to explain that. I always tell ADHD job seekers, keep in mind if you're applying to a position and this employer is not going to understand,
Then you don't want
that's kind of a
to work there.
self-select. Exactly. It's a self-selecting group. You don't want to work for them.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find an employer. We need to work with people who understand that we're human,
Mm-hmm.
that our skills are our skills. They're, whether or not we've had career gaps and whether or not we've changed careers, whatever it is, we still have those skills. That doesn't change that.
Yep. Yep, I think that's such a good point. Like we have to recognize that not only are they interviewing us and they reviewing
Yeah.
us, but we're also reviewing them. And so we're looking to see if this is going to be a good company to work for. The reality is you're spending a lot of time at this place and doing things for somebody else. And so the
Yeah.
question is like, do you want to spend all your time and energy there? And so,
Exactly.
and you need to, and the other thing that I feel like is pretty consistent within this conversation around just networking
Mm-hmm.
and positioning yourself to make yourself known to the people that are working at the company and really getting in those connections to help you get through the door, because otherwise you are just kind of one of a number in
Yeah.
the sea of resumes. And so I feel like maybe I should do a whole other live around just like what does networking look like with ADHD.
Yes.
Um, Somebody who's listening to me remind me that I said that. Let me just write this down.
I'll remind you, Megan. That's a good
Yeah,
one. Because networking
networking.
tends to be, it can be like triggering for us ADHDers. We hear that word, we don't really understand what it means, or it means like feels like salesy or slimy. But
Yeah,
like you said, it's education. It's about making yourself known.
yeah, and then it's like a mixed bag too because like I actually really love networking and mostly just because I love talking to people, which is why I'm
Yeah.
doing these lives, right? But like not all of us would want to be doing these lives with people that you do not know that you just randomly contacted on LinkedIn. And do that, right? And so like me, I could talk to anybody all day, but you sit me behind a computer and trying to do all this other, like trying to get these videos back uploaded. I'm like, ugh, I don't want to do all
Yeah.
that. Like, I just want to talk to people all day. But then some people are some people are the complete opposite, right? And so I think, but I think there's challenges on both ends when it comes to like networking with ADHD because sometimes, I can just overshare. And so like
Yeah.
what are those boundaries that you put in place when you're trying to network so that you can enhance your career or just build your entire professional like network in general? And some of the good things and the bad things that come with that. So I feel like we should just I just need to host like a whole separate conversation around networking with ADHD because it's such a huge requirement. Like the networking part has to go along with your resume if you're
Yeah.
actually looking for a particular type of job and following a particular career path.
Yes.
It's so crucial. Um, and so maybe that's part 3 of this series because I did interviewing with ADHD, and so now this is resume writing, and so yeah, maybe networking is the other part. But we are approaching the hour mark, and so I want to thank everybody for joining this conversation, and to thank you, Kerry, for responding to my messages.
Yes. Thank you
for my
so much for having me.
Yeah, for my call
I'm so glad
to
to.
action. And if you're listening to this and you're not following her, then I don't know what you're doing in life. I feel like you need to be following Kerry on Instagram, and then go to her socials, go to her website, see what services that she provides. I'm also, I'm an ADHD coach too, but I'm like we're all one person, and so we can only meet and talk to so many different people, and it has to be the right fit at the end of the day. And so I'm also about elevating that. They are providing a great service as well, and so check out to see what she's doing.
Awesome.
Um,
And as I love this space, I love talking to people like you, Megan. We're this it's such an awesome ADHD coach community. We're all supporting each other and doing best for ADHDers at the end of the day.
yeah, at the end of the day, we want all ADHDers to
Yeah.
thrive in the environment that we're placed in, right? And so we both happen to work in like the career space, and I do a little bit more targeting like around workplace accommodations and really making sure that we can create once you're there, like create that work environment that's going to be the most supportive for you, and
Yeah.
working with like your managers, working with hiring, like working with HR and trying to navigate that, because it's one thing to get a job, but it's a whole other thing to keep it.
Yes. Exactly. So important. So important that and I say even from day one, making sure on day one that you know what you need and you're setting up that environment for success. So
Right.
very important work. Thank you so much for what you do, Megan.
Yes, thank you. And so the month is not over. We still have a couple, we have 2 more days, right? Yeah, 2 more days. And I'm like looking at the calendar, I'm like, yes, 2 more days. So tomorrow we're going to be talking a little bit about ADHD and autism. And then on Friday, we're going to be doing some somatic exercises and like nervous system regulation exercises to end off the month. But there's been so many additional topics that have come up in these conversations, and I feel like there's across the month, and I feel like there needs to be some part twos to this. So we are extending some of the lives into November and December to the end of the year. I'm not sure if it's going to be every day like it is now because it is a lot, but but the conversations are not stopping. I also am going to be doing some group coaching for women with ADHD, in addition to opening up a coaching program that allows people to see some exclusive content and get some one-on-one and group coaching support. So that is going to be coming as well. So please, thank you for listening to my commercial at the end of this. But again, thank you again for coming. This was a great conversation. I can't wait to post a replay and to really get people to listen, to understand all of the ins and outs of resume writing when it comes to ADHD, the ADHD brain, and the things that we need to take in consideration. But also, I really am hoping that hiring managers and recruiters listen to this content too, because they need to also understand how difficult this process is, and is there a way that they can make this easier?
Love that.
Because we are a talented group of people, and you're missing out on us because the process doesn't support our brains. And so I'm hoping that, my plug for the recruiters and the hiring managers that are listening to this content, to make sure, to figure out how you can make your practices a little bit more inclusive and stop making it so daggone difficult.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Love it. Love that.
Yes.
Very important.
Yes. And so we are done for today, and then I will see y'all tomorrow. All right.
Thanks,
Do you have
Megan.
do
Thanks,
you have
everyone.
do you have any plugs that you want to, do you have anything that you want to plug while we have
I
a second?
have an event next week where I kind of go through how to win interviews when you ADHD friendly way. It's just a little more deeper analysis of what I've talked about, and you can find that on Eventbrite. That is November 7th at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, good. Okay, perfect. Make sure you check that out.
Thanks,
Okay, thank you
everyone.
so much.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Have a good day.